What is up, CSLC? It is so great to be with you guys tonight. I'm thrilled to dive into this topic of thriving is greater than surviving as we wrestle with what it means to build foundations in uncertain and volatile times. As we start our session tonight, I want to share a little bit of a story of my own life and take you back to the days of Little League in my small hometown of Bryan, Ohio, in Northwest Ohio. It was during a baseball camp in that tiny hometown that I stepped up to the plate for a home run derby, and with all of the strength that I could muster, the pitch came, and I channeled my inner slugger, and swing, and a miss. I heard the familiar sound of a thud on the backstop behind me. A great swing for a great miss. It was after the show of prodigious athleticism that one of the high schoolers, David, asked me to go with him towards the outfield fence. And during that time, David actually took the opportunity to teach me how to hold a bat, how to swing that bat, and eventually, for 30 minutes, soft-tossed a lot of baseballs to me and allowed me to have my own little private home run derby as crack after crack the bat went, and home run after home run went over the outfield fence about 6 feet away from where we were. David would later go on to play baseball at the college level in a university in Ohio, interacting with every person with the same care, enthusiasm, and love and heart that he encountered me with. Tragically, though, several years later, the Bluffton baseball team, the Bluffton University baseball team, was involved in a bus accident just north of Atlanta, Georgia. David was one of 7 teammates that lost their lives in that accident. And it was a loss that deeply impacted our small hometown community. It led several community members in their generosity and their grief to then eventually create what they called the David Joseph Betts Memorial Scholarship. The David Betts Scholarship is a scholarship that ultimately helped me go to college. And I share that rich memory with David because years later, as I began to look forward towards my own college experience, it was announced that I would have the opportunity to have the honor of this scholarship. And eventually, I was able to walk up on the stage, shake hands with David's father. And in that moment, he embraced me and shared with me words that have never left me. He said to me, "It's about your heart." As we dive into this idea of thriving being greater than surviving, and as we reflect on Isaiah chapter 41 as a CSLC tonight, I hope you'll remember with me that it's about your heart. As we dive in, I do want to read from Isaiah 41, verse 10 that we're reflecting on tonight. It says, "Don't be afraid, for I am with you. Don't be discouraged, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will hold you up with my victorious right hand." I don't know about you, but over the past several years, times have felt uncertain and volatile in every way. And I'd love to dive into talking a little bit about what these crises and these challenges have entailed and what they've meant for our life. But I do want to share that these ideas aren't exclusively my own. They're kind of adapted from one of my favorite leadership authors, a guy by the name of John Cotter, who several years ago released this book called Change. And in this book of Change, he wrote about thriving and surviving in the midst of crises. And I love this quote as they start off their book. They say, "A crisis is not an aberration, but a spike in a trend that has long and deep roots." The reality is that crises are ever active in our lives. It's a spike in a trend with deep roots in our lives. So how do we respond? How do we channel our thrive senses, not just to survive, but to work towards something great together, to be able to lean on and trust that God is with us, that he will encourage us and empower us. A common phrase thrown around in today's world is VUCA, as it pertains to crises and change. VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. What this means is that the world around us is constantly changing. We're constantly questioning. The issues and crises and challenges are constantly compounding, and there's constant unclarity in the midst of these situations. The VUCA world is all around us. There's a lot of literature that you can explore in this. But as we engage in this discussion today, I want us to wrestle with what does it mean to bring stability to VUCA? What does it mean to build a foundation? The reality is we can't stop things from changing. We will always have questions, things will always compound, and things will always be uncertain, unclear, and ambiguous. But what are the ways that we might be able to offer clarity? What are the ways we might be able to offer hope? And what are the ways we might be able to understand and see the work of God in our communities day in and day out? So let's start with surviving. It's something we all do. It's something we're all familiar with. Oftentimes when someone asks how I am, I'll tell them I'm surviving, but I'm trying to thrive. So why do we survive? Well, Cotter and his colleagues in their book Change describe what are called channels: the survive channel and the thrive channel. The survive channel identifies threats, which is not a bad thing. It's actually a way that we're hardwired to be able to identify and see the things that are threatening to us, that are risks to us. And ultimately, it helps steer us to be able to counteract and diffuse those threats. What survive focuses on is bringing equilibrium to the disequilibrium. The survive channel ultimately wants to bring balance, which is not a bad thing. You might be sitting back thinking, but surviving is so hard. No, an overheated survival mode is hard. Surviving itself is not a bad thing. Again, it helps us identify the threats and helps us counteract and diffuse those threats while seeking balance in our lives. The issue is when surviving becomes so overheated in the realities of our lives, overheated in the ways that we're constantly responding to challenges, overheated in the ways that we're constantly in crisis. And so how do we counteract the simple survive channel? Well, there are ways that we can actually engage a second channel of thriving, a channel that ultimately is about experiencing the fullness of God, both personally and in the context of our communities. Today, I want to use the terms thriving and flourishing sort of interchangeably, because ultimately flourishing and thriving are about both intrapersonal, what's happening in our inner selves, what's happening in our own callings, what's happening personally, and interpersonal, the ways in which we relate to each other, the ways in which our community develops and becomes a community of resilience and a community that becomes the best of which we're capable of becoming. Ultimately, when we begin to engage our thriving channel, we effectively work within our calling and we help others do the same. There was a paradigm that was shared with me several years ago by a good friend and a colleague that I would love to share with you as well. It's called the flourishing paradigm or the thriving paradigm, and it's adapted from a researcher a couple decades ago named Corey Keyes. But Keyes offers a context in which we have high levels of crisis or high levels of challenge in our life, but also high levels of fulfillment in our lives as well. And on this scale, math majors, you're going to love this. We'll see an opportunity to see on the y-axis a level of specific and personal fulfillment. On the other level, we'll see an opportunity for communal fulfillment and the opportunity to help others experience a sense of purpose and flourishing. In the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see with me that a lot of us might find ourselves at times languishing. We might not feel a sense of personal fullness, and we're certainly not having a positive impact on others. Just because we're languishing now doesn't mean that we have to continue languishing. Now, if you're anything like me, at times, if you move to the right in the very last quadrant, you'll see the word striving. Striving is what happens when we feel a sense of positive effect on the people around us, but we're lacking and seriously needing a sense of personal fulfillment and personal fullness. Now, if you're like me, that's something that you experience often, working towards the good of others, but not having the opportunity to reflect on a personal fulfillment and what those needs are. Now, in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see what's called settling. Settling is in the moments that we feel a sense of personal fullness, which is wonderful, but we're not necessarily having a positive effect or a positive impact on others. In essence, we're isolating ourselves and not allowing the good that's happening through and in us to be able to rub off on others, or vice versa. Now, what Keith says is the goal of thriving and flourishing is to feel a sense of personal fullness, which is critical and important, and have a positive effect on others. Thriving becomes something that's both personal in our lives and something that's communal, the ways in which we engage with the community around us. When we're truly utilizing our Thrive channel to counteract just the survival mode, we have the opportunity to engage others, to respond to crises, to respond to needs, and to lead well, while also experiencing a sense of purpose, place, and belonging in the midst of it. So, I'd like to take just a minute to invite you to critically think. Some of you may be reflecting and really believe that you're flourishing and thriving, which is wonderful. I'd love for you to write down a couple of the ways you see that active in your life. Some of us, though, might have to take an honest perspective and recognize the ways that we're languishing, or maybe the ways that we're striving, or maybe the ways that we're settling. I'd love for you to take a minute to write that down as well. Where do you find yourself on the spectrum? What does that entail for you? What are the signs for you that you see yourself as flourishing, as you see yourself as striving or settling or ultimately languishing? And then in turn, we don't want to stay there. So what are the ways that we might be able to work towards, that we might be able to invite community into our lives and start to begin to thrive together? Now, this is pulling from Cotter once again. You'll see these two channels outlined clearly. The Survive channel, again, is threat seeking. It actually engages some of our biology with our brain, our body, and emotions. When we're using our Survive channel, we might experience a sense of fear or anxiousness or anxiety. And ultimately, our behavior in a positive way is often fast problem solving. It's focused on the issues in front of us, and it's willing to resolve and bring balance and equilibrium to those issues. Again, surviving's not all bad. Surviving is a beautiful and good thing in the way that God has wired us. But when our Survive channel is overheated, that can be a problem. So in what ways might we be able to engage the Thrive channel? The Thrive channel ultimately begins to consider the opportunities that are in front of us. The Thrive channel is also a way that we're hardwired in our brain, body, and our emotions. And it gives us the opportunity to experience passion, excitement, and truly work towards with energy a broader goal. The behavior markers of a Thrive channel are things like curiosity, asking questions, being willing to dive into the challenges in front of us, but be open to the ground that's ahead. Other behaviors are innovation and collaboration and a willingness to work alongside others to be able to tackle and address the challenges in front of us. We build foundations of thriving in the context of community and in the context of where God is calling us. Now, I want to point out too, just like the Survive channel can be overheated, it's possible for the Thrive channel to be overheated as well. So in what ways might we be able to capitalize and pull on the strengths of others as they're seeing threats and wanting to resolve those, to be able to solve problems well, to be able to serve the needs, and ultimately to maintain a mission focus? Here are a couple specific applications between surviving and thriving. Surviving begins to ask the question, what do I have to do? What are the things that are in front of me that I have to do to be able to make it to the next day, to be able to survive? What are the have-tos? Conversely, thrive begs the question, what do we want to do? Who do we want to be? And what do we get to do? A good friend and mentor once shared the phrase O to E. And he said, I walked around for years telling people that I've got to do this, I've got to do that. But when we begin to engage our Thrive channel, to identify the opportunities ahead of us, we begin to change from got to get to. How do we recognize that there are things in our lives that we have to do, but we can ask each other questions, we can engage in communal processes to really reflect and dream about what we want to do as well? The Survive channel often uses the head. It's rational and analytical. It's calculated to be able to make the best decisions in fight or flight modes, while the Thrive channel focuses a bit more on the heart. It asks what our emotions are. It connects us with a level of emotional intelligence, and it asks what our motives are as well. The Survive channel is adept at management. It's focused on efficiency and getting things done and getting them done well, which is a wonderful skill and a wonderful talent. But those things don't matter much if we don't have vision. The Thrive channel engages a sense of leadership and setting forth a vision that's in front of us. A vision is a compelling picture of the future that produces passion. And I wonder for us today, whether it's on our halls, our clubs and organizations, our student government associations, or our campuses as a whole, what is a compelling picture of the future that produces passion in you? What is a compelling picture of the future that produces passion in your peers and the staff that serve you and you work alongside and the faculty whose class you sit in and day out? What is that compelling picture of the future, and how can we lead together to channel both our Thrive and our Survive channels? Another idea that I love from Cotter and his colleagues is this challenge of a select few versus a diverse many. We can often engage efficiently in tasks if we have a select few of people involved to focus and target and resolve the challenges that arise in front of us. That's okay from time to time. What Cotter explores, though, to be able to equip and channel our Thrive skills, is the challenge to be able to reflect and invite a diverse many, people who think differently than us, people who dream differently than us, people who have different motives and emotions than us, people who can engage us with new ideas, with collaboration, with innovation that eventually points us in the right direction moving forward. This is a long quote, so bear with me, but it's a good one as Cotter, Akhtar, and Gupta wrap up their thoughts in their book. They say this when it pertains to the challenges of crises and forces in our lives. What then can overcome these forces? A diverse and growing many, not just a select few taking new action. People acting in new ways because of their hearts, not just their minds, are directing them to want to and not just to have to. Proactive action, not just directed from the top via operating plans and budgets and hierarchy, but instead movement, because people in the middle and on the front lines actually help provide some leadership and some cultural change. More often than not, momentum is started because a powerful enough group sees not just changes happening around them, but opportunities that change provides. Thriving and building a foundation of thriving doesn't mean that there won't be challenges, that there won't be threats, and there won't be opportunities. But using our thriving channel engages the opportunities in front of us. They go on to say, and they develop those engaging the Thrive channel, first for themselves, and then in more and more colleagues, a true sense of urgency to do something to take advantage of those opportunities. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up with a story about a man named Admiral Jim Stockdale. Admiral Jim Stockdale was a Navy pilot during the Vietnam War. And you'll see him in all three of these pictures in three very different states. In the first picture, him climbing out of the cockpit of his Navy plane. In the next picture, you'll see him after returning from what was commonly called in the Vietnam War the Hanoi Hilton. Jim Stockdale was a prisoner in the Hanoi Hilton for several years, one of the longest serving prisoners in the Hanoi Hilton, where hundreds and hundreds of American soldiers and other soldiers were held captive. In the Hanoi Hilton, Stockdale, when he returned, ultimately offered a perspective. When someone asked him, Jim, how did you survive all those years in the Hanoi Hilton when so many other soldiers didn't? How did you make it? How did you cling to hope? And how did you know that the next day someone would come to save you? What I love about Stockdale's response is that he offered three pictures of various prisoners in the prison. First were those who every single Easter, every single Christmas, every single birthday thought that someone was coming to save them, but it was a loose hope. There actually was no hope because there was nothing to base that hope upon. In the same way, there were those prisoners that day in and day out recognized that the circumstances were grim, that they may never get out, and ultimately they lost hope. But ultimately, what Stockdale shared is that he and his colleagues and fellow soldiers, the ones who persisted and made it out of the Hanoi Hilton, were able to do so because they did two things. They first confronted the brutal facts in front of them. They were willing to channel the survive channel to be able to address the threats in their lives. At the same time, they did not lose hope. They looked for the opportunities to engage and support each other in communal ways. And they clung to the hope and the reality that the peace would come, that they would escape the prison. The Stockdale paradox reminds us that we must confront the brutal facts with our survive channel, but we must never, ever lose hope as we cling to our survive or thrive channel as well. I want to go ahead and wrap up with some questions to consider. I'll let you screenshot this. This could be for your teams. This could be yourself. But I'm wondering how you're responding to these thrive and survive channels, how you see them existing in your clubs and organizations, in your dorms, and across your friend groups. What are some opportunity statements that you can engage about the threats and opportunities? And then within your organization, your institution, your club, what are some present organizational challenges? And how can you truly celebrate and cling to the hope that fuels the sense of thriving? At the end of the day, I want to remind you this. When it comes to surviving and thriving, it's about your heart. Remember that as we engage with both our heart and our head, as we engage the select few and the diverse many, we have the opportunity to thrive, not just survive. Thank you guys so much, and best of luck.